remain exactly where you are. Make no move until you are ordered.
There is a stark difference between a human being and being human. This is shown through the masterful way that George Orwell and Ridley Scott used the power of storytelling in their narratives 1984, written in 1948, and Blade Runner 1992, respectively. The two creators exhibit the notions of surveillance, loss of various freedoms, and marginalization, thus illuminating connections that we may have in our world that make us human and the worlds of these stories. Through the world of 1984, Orwell provides rich opportunities to illuminate the idea of constant surveillance and government control of people's every move, thus resulting in the loss of the freedom of speech and thought. The best examples of the repression of such liberties comes in the form of newspeak. The purpose of this language was to reduce the range of thought, which was significant to the party, as this would allow them to manage people the way they pleased. We can see this through Orwell's use of a rhetorical question when Syme asks Winston whether it has ever occurred to you, Winston, not a single human being will be alive who can understand such a conversation as we're having now. Hence, allowing the party to use language as a tool of manipulation and propaganda, thus making the citizens of Oceania unknowing victims of deceptive and controlling figures of power and aiding these people in achieving their ideological mission of total control. People's naivety is summed up perfectly by Orwell with his use of metaphor when saying that Parsons swallowed it easily, with the stupidity of an animal, when the party had revealed that the chocolate rations had gone up when only the day before they were lowered. This also serves as the motif of the novel, this being stupidity and naivety, thereby representing government control, which is reinforced by the people's willingness to accept it without a second thought. Further, Orwell paradoxically grounds his comments about surveillance within his personal context, thus illuminating the idea of control. This is seen through the third-person narration of the helicopter, which skimmed down between the roofs, which historically alludes to the developments of the helicopter as well as other technological advancements in Orwell's time, suggesting that a sense of fear and paranoia in response to such surveillance fuels an individual's self-censorship. Posters of Big Brother are also used with the inscription of "Big Brother is watching you," serving as a symbol of government's total control and repression of the will of the populace. Therefore, through this text, we can make the connection between ourselves and our world full of technology to the world of 1984, and showing us that one must be able to see beyond what is just in front of them, thus providing the opportunity of illuminating the notion of surveillance and government control. Orwell illuminates the motif of 1984 as being the radical loss of individuality and amputation of the human spirit, as seen through the protagonist of the novel, Winston Smith. Despite the party pushing the agenda of citizens denying their individuality for the totalitarian government to live, Winston rebels in the forms of keeping a personal journal in which he writes blasphemous things against the party and Big Brother. Winston would also write things such as, "Freedom is the freedom to say that 2 + 2 make 4, which goes against the party slogan of "freedom is slavery," being a paradox of what freedom actually means. Winston also has an intimate relationship with Julia. His relationship with Julia deems him anomalous, and it is through this that he paradoxically excludes party ideology while feeling included in his relationship, which reflects Orwell's praise for the search of authentic relationships as an act of passive defiance against oppression. Sadly, despite the struggles of Winston, he still succumbs to the torture of the party and becomes part of the collective. This is reinforced by Winston's compliance with his society, despite his internal rebellion, in The Horrible Thing About 2 Minutes Hate was not that one was obliged to act a part, but that it was impossible to avoid joining in, where the surprising tone challenges our presumptions on inclusion and how it can often not be avoided due to social pressure, as was seen in many totalitarian nations in the time of Orwell and prior who used propaganda to shape their nation's collective thoughts on national enemies. Such inclusion eventually culminates to a realization of the individual's former self-imposed exclusion from society, seen in the exclamation, "O stubborn self-willed exile from the loving breast," in which the self-willed exile symbolizes Winston's previous emphasis on his own individual experiences and small-scale collective experiences with Julia to highlight his exclusion from Oceania, which he eventually succumbed to. We can see in the novel that in the end, his rebellion and struggle amounts to nothing, as both him and Julia are taken away by the thought police. We can symbolically see this rebellion as the beautiful fragment of coral, a tiny crinkle of pink, like a sugar rosebud from a cake, that Winston purchases rolled across the mat, being symbolic of the destruction of that last bit of hope that Winston was holding on to. Thus, through this loss of individuality revealed in 1984, we see the anomalies of human behavior. Similarly, Ridley Scott in his narrative illuminates these ideas, thus connecting his film Blade Runner to 1984 by paralleling Orwell's concern for humans' desire for control over other people. However, Scott translates these concerns into his own context-specific perspective, that being a futuristic dystopian world portrayed through the narrative style of film to engage the technophilic audience of his context. In Ridley Scott's Blade Runner, we are shown a story of moral philosophy and the humaneness of creating an advanced, almost human AI. In the film, the robots, or replicants, whose more accurate description would be synthetic humans, are on a journey for life. We can see this through the extended metaphor of Leon's photographs, which represents the replicants' desire for connection to their heritage, past, and humanity, through discovering their own narrative, which is contrasted against the 2019 world full of social isolation and spiritual deprivation. Roy Batty is shown in the final act of the film retelling his narrative. He has seen things you people wouldn't believe. All those moments will be lost in time, like tears in rain. In Roy's final moments, he tells Deckard his story, illustrating his zest for life and how his narrative made him more human. We see Roy's humanity through him saving Deckard's life, as it demonstrates that Roy has grown, understands the value of life and the importance of empathy, a human characteristic. Ironically, the humans in the film lack this empathy, as they relentlessly hunt down and kill the replicants, creating a paradox. This anomaly in human behavior is highlighted through the loss of basic human characteristics within this power-driven and oppressed society, which is shown through the exclusion of replicants. Thus, Scott conveys the need to search for an identity and act as moral individuals in order to define ourselves as not only human, but more significantly humane. This allows us to create a connection between ourselves and the film Blade Runner. The illumination of human issues presented in 1984 and Blade Runner highlight the importance of freedom and individuality. With that being said, with all of our progression in the 21st century, could we ever truly escape the dystopias presented in these narratives?